Hi everyone, Vacha here from recordingstudio9.com and thanks for joining me again today. In today's video is a follow-up video on Presonus Studio 1824 Part 3. In this video, I'm going to quickly demonstrate you where to find it and how to download the drivers for the USB audio interface. You simply visit presonus.com and log in to your Presonus online account. If you don't have one, it's free to create. Make sure you create one, and when you log in, register your hardware, which is Studio 1824 in this case. There's a big button, says register a product. You click on that, enter the serial number, and it's registered. And once it's registered, as you see on the screen, you will find that unlike the rest of the products that I have from Presonus, Studio 1824 is on the left. Once it's registered, click on View More Details link. Once you click, Presonus will list you all of the software that you have license for. This also includes Studio One for Artist, the Plugin Alliance Brainworks, as well as Attacker, Mag Audio, EQ2, and so on. Atura Analog Lab, which is a VST instrument, the Lexicon Reverb, fantastic reverb, Output Movement, which is a panning VST instrument, and a really great tube compressor, Clagham SDRR2 tube. You get them all free. I still haven't installed Studio One for Artist because, as you know, Artist doesn't support third-party plugins. And I'm quite interested to find out how these third-party plugins actually work with it. Obviously, there must be some way. But we'll find that out in probably a follow-up video. Scroll further down and you will find the downloads of installer. The Universal Control 2.9.0.429.213 for Windows or later version. Just click the download and download it. You can also download the owner's manual and any release notes available as well. Locate the downloaded file, double-click to start the installation, and we'll get this dialog. We click Next, Next, agree to the conditions, Next. From the list, all we need to select is Studio USB. Unless you have any of the other interfaces, the only one you need to select is USB driver for Studio series. Click Install and let it install. Once the installation is complete, you will also notice an icon on your desktop called Universal Control. Click the Finish button. If you haven't connected your Studio 1824 by now with the USB connection, connect it to your laptop or your computer before you start running the Universal Control app. Let's double click and run Universal Control. And there we go. Universal Control already detected my Studio 1824 connected with its sample rate of 44.1 kHz, internal clock, block size of 512 bytes, and so on. So it's all good, ready to go. So let's explore the Universal Control options available for Studio 1824. And we get that by double-clicking on the actual image. What you see on the screen is the live mixer. Most people get confused between this mixer and the actual Universal Control. Now, Universal Control basically allows the unit, the Studio 1824, to communicate with any DAW. It will take the inputs from the Studio 1824 and present them into any DAW, and any audio from your DAW will go out to the designated outputs of the 1824. When we double click and we get this mixer with faders, this is when it allows us to actually use the 1824 as a live mixer. So we are then able to adjust the levels of the inputs with zero latency directly and send them to the main output by selecting here. What we're seeing here are the faders for the main outputs of our inputs, mic 1 to mic 8. This is regardless of what signal is being sent to your DAW. The gain of each of the inputs is controlled by the physical gain knob on the actual Studio 1824, and that is the level that you need to set so that you get a nice clean signal in your DAW. But regardless of that fact, you can have a different level going into your main as a live mixer. Even though you might have your mic number 4 all the way down because it's very hot signal or very loud signal, so that you're not gonna overload your PA system that's connected to your 1824's main output, the left and right. But the signal being recorded in your DAW for input 4 as the mic will have no effect by the change of this fader volume. They are independent. Same goes with the pairs of outputs like 3 and 4. You can have different levels going out during a live performance situation. Let's say your monitors on stage. Disc 5 and 6 could be other monitors on the stage. Maybe the drummers. And 7 and 8, maybe these are the sort of the speaker monitor, stage monitor output on for the bass and guitar player and so on. And you can have different levels for each of those outputs controlled through this software. And this is your main left-right output. So just to recap, this live mixer is independent of the signal that is being sent to your DAW. That's where a lot of people get confused. A lot of the time, if you are just recording in your studio, you can actually bypass this live mixer. You won't need it. It'll actually confuse you more, so you're better off not using it unless it's for a live situation, using your Studio 1824 for live performances. And to do that, you can just go in here and say Mixer Bypass. Click back, and as you can see, Mixer Bypass, now it's not going to have any effect. So now your DAW has full control of its input and its output. Just so that we can understand some of its features, I'm just going to re-enable the mixer. Peak hold is a nice idea. You can change into a lighter color. You can colorize the channels as well. So anyway, so let's have a quick look. When we actually click on the 48 volts, the actual light on the unit comes on as well. It's just like me pressing the button, and as you can see, I'm going to move my mouse here, and I'm going to physically press the button, and the 48 line goes off. Same with the line. That's the same as pressing the line button for inputs 1 and 2 on the actual unit. And it also the same thing with the mute. So we can see they all talk together, and the mono as well. Next to it, we have the SPDIF output. And this allows us to select what goes out there. Maybe the main mix, or mix 3 and 4, mix 5 and 6, mix 7 and 8. So it depends on your live situation what you want to send to SPDIF. You know, if you have a digital recorder, digital stereo recorder that you're recording your live performance, then you can set here as the main mix to go to an SPDIF a digital recorder so you can record it. You know, that's one reason why would you use it. Now, another thing that I should mention about these two buttons here. This allows you to select a channel color. So if you want to make this a different color, like red, so it goes red. So you can identify groups of microphones together. Let's say if you've got drums and then you want to make sure visibly easy to detect which ones they are, you can color them. And this button here, which looks like an infinity sign or two zeros next to each other, it allows you to link the two adjacent channels to each other. So if we have something, let's say at the input 3 and 4 as a stereo input, we have a line synthesizer connected at inputs 3 and 4. We can select 3 and click on this button. Now as you can see, 4 disappeared, and we it goes from 3 straight to 5, because now this fader adjusts the volumes for your live mixing of inputs 3 and 4. And this becomes a balance rather than panning. So by unclicking, we get our 4 back again as well. That's what that is used for. So basically, just to recap, this mixer here that you see is for live mixing purposes. And it is not required, generally not required, when you are recording in your studio in your DAW and you don't need live mixing. It could be confusing if you want to use the live mixer at the same time as recording, because you will have some, you got to keep going in and out of your DAW, coming here and adjusting volumes and wondering why sometimes you can't hear a channel, you can't hear this, or you are hearing some audio on a channel that you're not supposed to be hearing it because you muted it, and so on. So for easier, if you are not using for live mixing situation, your Studio 1824, you'll be better off bypassing and not using this mixer. Now, one thing I should also mention, that the Studio 1824 supports the zero latency, the Z monitoring, which I will talk about and demonstrate in a few minutes. What it means is that Studio One can actually control this matrix within Studio One application itself, the DAW. That means you can still listen to any of the inputs and direct them to any of the headphone outputs, the headphone output 1 and 2, and listen to the inputs with zero latency while you are using Studio One DAW. Because Studio One can control a special link, direct link processing within Studio 1824, allowing you to listen to any of the microphone or line level inputs or any of its 8 inputs straight into the headphone without going the round trip of the DAW, but allowing you to feel that it is actually going through Studio One's processing. So to find out a little bit more, let's go into Studio One and I'll show you what I mean. I now have Studio One Prime Edition running. Let's go and select and configure the audio interface. Selected the Studio USB, which is our Studio 1824 with 512 samples. And if we look at the processing, we can see that, dropout protection medium. We cannot select low latency. It's already selected by default because our sampling rate is too high. It automatically knows that it's going to be far too slow. There's going to be a lot of latency if we actually use this software processing. So it's automatically enabled the hardware monitoring of low latency. And we can get the audio round trip of, virtually zero latency. Now, if we go and reduce the sample from 512 to 256 or maybe 128, so now our latency has gone really down to 5.4 milliseconds for input and 2.9 millisecond output. If we go back to processing, so now we can actually have monitoring for instruments as well. Use native low latency monitoring instead of hardware monitoring. What this does is it will allow Studio One to process the audio latency rather than hardware. And there are differences. At this state, we can see that in Blue Z, sort of zero latency option, we have zero latency because the input is directly and digitally wired to the outputs of the hardware. So it's not even, what we hear on the headphones are wired directly. So that's why it's zero latency. And we have 5.8 millisecond latency for any VSTI we use. So you won't be able to tell. It's quick enough for you not to be able to hear any latency. But if we want to use any effects for the live inputs coming in, let's say if you play a guitar and you want to put a VST instrument like an amp simulator, then what you need to do is select this one. And this allows for the data to be processed, to come into Studio One, get processed, and then sent out to the outputs or your headphones on your physical Studio 1824. And hence, now we have 11.2 millisecond low latency round trip. Again, it's still quite low for any audio signal coming into 1824 to your laptop or PC, in this case my laptop, being processed by a VST instrument like an amp simulator, and then going back out to my headphones. You know, anything less than 10 millisecond, you can virtually can't tell. And we can probably achieve more by reducing the 128 to 64 samples. And you see now is 5.9 milliseconds. You virtually won't feel any delay from the time you strum your guitar and to the time that you actually hear it. So that's what the green Z means in Studio One. That means it's actually the signal coming into Studio One and going out. But if you are using, let's say, vocals or guitar pedals and you're recording with effects already, by unchecking and getting the blue hardware monitoring, zero latency, that means your VSTi amp simulator won't be processed. You won't hear that, but you definitely will hear zero latency from your input to your headphones or the output. We have the option of setting this blue or green zero latency in our projects as well. So just to demonstrate, I'm just going to close that and create a new song. Just an empty song, that is fine. Just click OK. When we open our mixer, at the moment you see it's all grayed out. When we click, it turns blue because that's what we selected. That means we are doing zero latency hardware monitoring. That's the signal that we are going to get. So if we open up, let's say, a track, so any audio coming here we listen to, we are listening to it through the hardware and not through here. So any, let's say, if we add ampere, if we play guitar into this input, we are not going to hear any of the effects of the ampere guitar amp sim. But if we put any instrument, like Presonus, okay, we see we have a green button there to activate and deactivate it. That means it's using the lowest latency possible within Studio One. So you can see it's right there. So we can enable and disable the zero latency or minimum latency for our instrument. We can enable that. So now if we are playing an instrument using Presonus and we are recording a guitar, we'll be able to hear the guitar without the Empire amp simulator, but we'll be able to hear our Presonus notes while we're playing on a MIDI controller keyboard without much delay. But if we want to hear Empire, we need to change the blue Z. That's done through our settings. And we enable native low latency monitoring instead of hardware monitoring. And now, if we connect the guitar to our input and then use Empire, we'll be able to hear all of the effects with very minimal latency. Well, I hope now you know all about the universal control and the built-in live mixer that you can use with your Studio 1824 that may or may not be useful for you, but you do need the universal control as a driver so you can have all of your inputs and outputs in your DAW. In this case, I've just demonstrated in Studio One Prime Edition. And one thing I forgot to actually show you is the inputs. As you can see, we've got all of the inputs right here, bigger. So you can see I've got inputs 1 to all the way to 8, then SPDIF, left, right, and ADAT 1 to 8, and virtual inputs 1 and 2, which is something I might talk about in the next video, which is available as a loopback in your universal control. And as for outputs, there we go. These are the outputs for line out left and right, which is the same as 1 and 2. They are parallel. Then you have line out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then you have SPDIF left and right outputs and the ADAT outputs 1 to 8. So that's how you set up your matrix in your Studio One as well. Well, I hope this information was useful for you. Now you know what universal control does, whether you need it or you don't need it. If it was helpful, make sure you give me the thumbs up. And if you have any further questions, just comment below and I'll try to answer them for you. In case there is some things about the blue Z and the green Z that you're still not sure of, comment below so that in my next video, a follow-up video, I'll be able to answer those questions for you. Till next time, as always, thanks for watching and have a great time making music. Cheerio, guys.